Hello everybody, this is Frank from MTG Unlimited, and today I'll be sharing with you my M15 spoiler reviews. So far this set looks pretty good, and I'm hoping it does really well for Standard, so let's get into the cards here. Up first you can see a Johnny Steadfast, 4-drop Planeswalker that enters with 4. Its +1 ability is really good, especially for white weenie decks and other aggro decks. And giving creatures +1/+1 and first strike, vigilance, and lifelink until end of turn is just insane, especially in combination with cards like Brimaz, Fabled Hero, and other cards that have heroic. There's not really much else to say about that. It's just a great ability overall. His -2 isn't that great. You don't really need to put a +1/+1 counter on each of your creatures and loyalty counters on your other planeswalkers. It's really only good for aggro decks late in the game to try to just pull off a win right at the end. However, his ultimate is insane. If you can get up to his ultimate, you basically have just won the game because you're going to be taking almost no damage at all except for 1, and you can swing with everything and not have to worry about blockers. Yeah, overall, just a great planeswalker. Let's move on to Jace. New Jace is a 4-drop, enters with 5. That's pretty good, but his +1 isn't as good as I would like. Look at the top 2 cards of your library and put one of them in your graveyard. It's basically just a scry 2. I mean, it's not really that good. You don't even get to draw any of the cards. It's just not a great ability overall. His -3, return another target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. I mean, yeah, it's helpful, especially for things like Desecration Demon and Storm Breath, but overall, it's not really going to be that great in Standard, especially as a -3. And then his ultimate is pretty much a Jace the Mind Sculptor type thing. Basically, you restart the game, you get to draw 7, but your opponent doesn't. Yeah, I mean, it's a decent ultimate. I mean, basically you're guaranteed the win, but half the time you're not even going to get up to the ultimate, and the +1 is so bad that it's not even worth it. Okay, so let's move on to the next Planeswalker, Lilia. She was also printed in, I believe, M10 and M11, but I'm not completely sure. Just a pretty decent Planeswalker overall. 5-drop for enters with 5. +1, target player discards a card. That's pretty good, especially later in the game when you're pretty much going to be top decking and your opponents might have 1, 2 cards in their hand. Pretty much gets rid of their removal spells in their hand. Her -2, you basically just tutor up a card. That's a really good ability. I generally just use her for the tutor. You get to just put it straight up on top of the library and draw it next turn. I think that's a great ability. Her ultimate is put all creature cards from all graveyards onto the battlefield in your control. This is just an insane ultimate, but most of the time you're not even going to get up to her ultimate, and it's not really necessary. I'd recommend just using her -2 ability just to tutor up the cards that will help you win the game quicker. Overall, a decent Planeswalker. I'm glad they're reprinting her instead of the Dark Realms. So let's move on here to Shandra. They printed her last core set in M14. I think she's a decent Planeswalker. Her +1 ability is not that great. I mean, it's decent for aggro decks since it makes it so the creature can't block, but other than that, not a very good ability. Her 0, it's not really that great. I mean, half the time it might be a land card. It might be something that's basically irrelevant for your game. She's really good for aggro decks, but other than that, not much. And even then, she's really slow for aggro decks too. Her ultimate is pretty insane, but you only get to cast 1 card and copy it 3 times. I mean, if it's like a lightning strike or something like that, it might be pretty decent, but you still have to pay the mana costs. Actually, never mind, you don't have to pay the mana costs. So, I mean, it's a pretty decent ultimate, but overall, I think she's just too slow for the format. Moving on to Nyssa. She's a really good Planeswalker overall. 5 mana for enders with 3 counters on it. It's not super great. Her first +1 isn't super great either. Basically, target land becomes a 4/4 elemental creature until end of turn. It's still a land. It gives you a free blocker, but other than that, it's not a great ability. I'm really excited about her second ability, though. You get to untap up to 4 target lands, and that's just insane in the format. You play her for 5 mana, you get to untap 4 more, and just play like a 4-drop on the side, too. She's really going to speed things up for green overall. It's just gonna really affect standard, and I'm really excited to see how that works. Her ultimate is really good actually. It's a 7. You get to put out a ton of elementals. It's a good win condition, but generally you're not going to be using her for that just because her other +1 is such a great ability and it takes so long to get to the ultimate. I'm really excited to see her in standard. Okay, the next planeswalker we're going to see is the last one in the set, Garrick Apex Predator. He's a 7 drop and he's black and green, which is an interesting color combination, but I think it can work, especially with in Jund. You can easily ramp into him with things like Sylvan Caryatid and Elvish Mystic. I think you could easily play him on turn 5, no problem, in a Jund deck. He enters with 5 loyalty counters, which is pretty good. He also has the first 4 ability planeswalker to come around since Jace the Mind Sculptor. However, Jace the Mind Sculptor was only 4 mana, which obviously was a lot better, but oh well. Garrick's +1s are all very good. His first one, you get to destroy another planeswalker. Just wrecks other decks, especially things like Bug Super Friends and junk mid-range decks like that really focus on their planeswalkers. His other +1, you get to put out a free 3/3 beast with Death Touch. It's great overall because you can swing with that and they're not going to want to block. Just because it has Death Touch, they'll lose all their creatures. Also, your opponents will be afraid to attack you. Just really good +1 abilities overall. His -3 is also very good. You get to destroy another creature and you gain life equal to its toughness. Not only do you get to destroy another creature that your opponent controls, but you also get to gain the life too. Just a great ability overall. It's only a -3, so I think it's definitely doable since he enters with 5 counters on him. His ultimate is insane, however. Your opponent gets an emblem with whenever a creature attacks you, it gets +5/+5 and trample until end of turn. This is a great win condition for a deck like Jund. Basically, on the turn where you're ultimating him, you're just going to go and swing with everything, and everything gets pumped by 5 and gets trampled. It's pretty much unstoppable. There's no way your opponents are going to be able to prevent that from happening. I think he's just a great planeswalker overall. I'm really looking forward to see him in Standard. Okay, the next card we'll see is Sliver Hivelord. It's just a great Sliver overall. It's 1 mana of each color, 5 mana for a 5/5, and Sliver. It gives all Slivers you control indestructible. This is just an insane card overall, because not only is she indestructible, but all your other Slivers that you've been playing the whole game have indestructible too. In a Sliver deck, I think this could be pretty insane. Sliver tribal decks are generally pretty crazy. I think in Standard there's not really a place for her, but I definitely think she could be a decent commander for a 5-color deck, or just in like casual Sliver tribal decks. Just pretty insane overall. There's not much else to say about her. Pretty straightforward. I think she's just a pretty good card. I'm looking forward to seeing her in casual play. The next card, the Chain Veal. I'm really looking forward to seeing this card and how it affects Standard. It's a 4-drop, and at the beginning of your end step, if you didn't activate a loyalty ability on a Planeswalker this turn, you lose 2 life. And then you can pay 4 and tap, and then basically you get to activate another loyalty ability on all of your Planeswalkers this turn. This is an insane card, especially for decks like Bug, Super Friends, or Bant Planeswalkers, or even Junk Midrange. Any deck that plays a lot of Planeswalkers, this is just going to be insane because you don't just proliferate. You get to use any ability you want, whichever one it is, and you also get to activate the counters as well. So basically you get to activate all your Planeswalkers twice each turn. It's generally pretty amazing. I'm really excited to see how this card works in Standard, if it works at all, but I think it'll do really well. I'm really looking forward to seeing it. The next card is Soul of New Phyrexia. I personally think that this is one of the best souls in M15. All the other ones generally aren't that great, but I think this one is definitely the best by far. It's a 6-drop, 6/6 with trample, and then his abilities are also really good. You get to make all your permanents indestructible until end of turn. It's a great response to things like Supreme Verdict, or just anything that tries to kill all your creatures, or anything like that. Also, you get to exile him from your graveyard and make things indestructible again. So even if he dies, you get to keep making your permanents indestructible. I think he's pretty decent. I'm excited to see how he plays out in Standard. I don't think there's going to be a ton of decks that use him just because he is so slow for the format, but I definitely think he'll see some casual or definitely commander play. I'm really excited to see him. The next card we'll be looking at is Eveson, Guardian Angel. It's a new Eveson, 5-drop, 5/4 flying vigilance. That's generally pretty good. I mean, the 3 white is kind of tough to play in standard, but I think in a white weenie deck she'd be pretty decent. Her first ability I think is really good. It's basically a God's Willing for 2 mana. You give target creature pro color of your choice until end of turn. That's decent. You get to save your important creatures like Brimaz or anything else in a white weenie deck that you need to save. Her second ability I don't think is very good. I mean, it basically gives you pro color of your choice until end of turn, but it's 7 mana. I think that's kind of ridiculous. It's way too much mana, and you're generally not going to be able to get that off in standard at all. I think she might be a decent commander, however. I think she'll definitely see commander play. These next cards I'm really excited to see come back. Painlands were originally printed in 10th edition, 9th edition, and forget the other set they were printed in. But they're great alternatives now that Shocklands are rotating. There's only 5 of them, however, so there's definitely going to be an imbalance in standard for a while. I think that they're going to not reprint the other 5 until maybe next core set, but I'm excited to see these in standard. It'll help speed up the format a little bit after Shocklands rotate. I think Painlands are really good. Deals only 1 damage to you every time you tap it, which you're probably not going to be tapping it for red or for whatever colors you need that much, except for in the early turns. So you end up not going to taking a ton of damage, but overall I think they're really good, and I'm really excited to see them come into play. Thanks for watching. If you have any other suggestions, please feel free to comment. If you wouldn't mind, please hitting that like or subscribe button. That would be great. I appreciate all the support. Thanks for watching.